All righty. Good afternoon, everyone. Hi there. We'll just see our numbers ticking up in terms of participants. My name's Shauna Lawson. I'm the Director of Research and Social Innovation here at PacificSport, British Columbia. I'm so honored to be helping to moderate this panel on return to sport in partnership with PacificSport Interior, and we're very happy to have Kamloops, City of Kamloops on the call as well. The webinar, the town halls really were inspired by a webinar that we hosted on June 4th, trying to provide some clarity around this, complex world of return to sport. On that call, we had over 1,000 participants register, and we had hundreds of questions submitted. And so while we did our best to answer them within an hour, it was very loud and clear that there was lots of folks who are really passionate about getting sport back to their communities and had lots of questions yet to be answered. And so these town halls, in partnership with our regional alliance centers, are really an effort to fill in that gray area. So in terms of an agenda, the webinar or town hall won't be us going through the guidelines in really intense detail. You can see the document there. Instead, we're going to spend most of the time answering questions and, again, really trying to fill in that gray area. So I'm going to ask the panelists to take a few minutes and introduce themselves and their organization. Then I'm going to toss over to Jared Cope, our Director of Provincial Activation, to spend a couple of minutes just telling you everything we know around the process of return to sport, and then the rest of the time we'll spend on questions. So we did get some questions submitted ahead of time, but otherwise I'll ask you to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So you'll see a little Q&A box. If you click and enter your questions there, I'll be writing furiously down your questions, making sure that they get to the panelists, and we also have another staff member behind the scenes who will be helping to kind of generate themes and making sure that we're answering your questions. They're critically important, so please do put them in there. Two more housekeeping notes before we jump in. I did link the guidelines, the PacificSport Return to Sport guidelines in the Q&A, in the chat function, as well as the BCRPA Return to Activity guidelines. And finally, the session's being recorded, so if you need to jump off or you want to share it with a colleague or friend, or want to watch it with your family over dinner some night, you could do that. So yeah, we're really pleased you've chosen to spend the hour with us here today. So with that, I'm going to throw it over to Jared to introduce himself.
Hi everyone, my name is Jared Cope, and yeah, I'm representing PacificSport. Myself and colleague Heather Beatty have been leading the process for return to sport for our organization, and been working closely with government and the public health office to sportify what their guidelines are. And so really excited to be here and to share the information that I have and be able to answer all the questions that you may have.
Awesome, thanks Jared. Let's throw it over to Carolyn.
Good afternoon, everyone. Carolyn Boomer, Executive Director with PacificSport Interior BC. I'm happy to be on the call today. And for those who don't know, what our regional center is about is really just inspiring communities to play, participate, and perform through sport. We've been busy as a multi-sport organization, working very closely with our partners, City of Kamloops. You'll meet Linda Stride in a minute, as well as, of course, PacificSport and Jared and the folks, the good team down there, and a lot of our other partners. So just like Return to Sport, we ourselves have been sharing resources with local sport organizations, many of whom are just working through the guidelines themselves in concert with their provincial sport organization, and just really trying to share and as much information as possible, and try and align messages, especially with the municipalities or town villages and in the rural areas. And really just last thing to say is really the power of partnerships is so important. And so we're all in this together, and really, trying to navigate it as best we can. And so look forward to the dialogue.
Yeah, I love it, Carolyn. Thanks so much. And Linda, last but not least.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Linda Stride, and my role with the city is overseeing recreation, sport, and health and wellness programs and services. So I have a team of coordinators who do all the programming and coordinating and one in particular who really does a lot of liaising with our local sport organizations. So I've been very involved at this stage, working very closely with Carolyn and with our Kamloops Sports Council in assisting the local sport organizations and groups, because some of which aren't affiliated with a PSO or an NSO, and just helping them to navigate this process of returning to sport. Huge shout out to Via Sport, because the templates that you have provided have been immensely helpful to the groups. Many of them are using them and just wordsmithing where they need to, and are extremely thankful that they had a place to start as opposed to having to develop their own plan from scratch. So thank you very much. I know so many of the organizations are truly grateful for those resources. And yeah, I'm happy to be here and look forward to answering some questions and hearing the dialogue.
Thanks so much, Linda. I'll definitely pass the kudos on to the team. That was our hope, that the guidelines would be really helpful. So thank you for mentioning that. Okay, Jared, over to you to walk us through the process.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm not going to talk a lot about the details of the guidelines. They are on our website, and so you're more than welcome. I'm sure a lot of you have seen them. I'm going to talk more about the process of where we're at today. Via Sport has released our sector-wide guidelines a few weeks ago, and once that happened, the provincial sport organizations were finalizing their sport-specific guidelines. Those sport-specific guidelines have a number of them have been approved by the provincial sport organization's board of directors and have been released to the clubs to then build their plan. So right now, there are 38 sports that have board-approved plans that then allows the local sport organizations to develop their local plans for the return to sport. And so that's happening right now across our province. And what we're wanting to see is for at the local level to also get board approval of your plan, so that it is in alignment with your provincial sport organization, which is really in alignment with Via Sport and the public health office. So that everyone's in a different stage of that. The other piece that's really important is, every municipality is different, and they're also in operationalizing and opening their facilities. So there has to be a marrying of the two plans of the sport organization and the municipality to ensure that you are following all the protocols that are in front of you. There's also, if you aren't a sport organization that's attached to a provincial sport organization or a member of, the municipality or facility operator should still be asking for a plan, so that will still need to be done no matter what your affiliation is having that plan. The plan is in the same. It can be 2 documents, or it can be one that is that COVID-19 safety plan. Every organization, company, in BC, whether you're a sport or a restaurant or anything in between, needs to have a COVID-19 safety plan. So your return to sport plan can act as a COVID-19 safety plan, or it can be 2 separate documents. But every one of the organizations will need to have a COVID-19 safety plan, and most likely, from what I've seen from facility operators and or municipalities, is to submit that plan to them as part of a rental agreement. So that is the plan back. The last thing I'd like to say is that sport is not looking the same. Every sport has modifications within their plans that need to be adhered to, and so and every sport is a little bit different, but the modifications will need to be in place. And it's not just when you have a plan that you're going to be returning to your sport as it looked pre-COVID. But everyone's a little bit different in that.
Awesome. Thanks, Jared. Good way to get us started. So I'll just remind folks, if you, we'd love to hear your questions. So if you click on the Q&A at the bottom, you could type your questions in. They'll come to me, and we'll make sure that they get to the panelists. So no question is too small, too detailed. They all count, and this is the place to ask them. So make sure that any of your curiosities are going in that Q&A box. So I'm going to start with a question for you, Jared, that we've been getting all the time, and some that we got pre-submitted, which is around timing. So every time we watch Bonnie Henry on her daily update, we have this hint that phase 3 is coming. So maybe we'll start with you. Any indication of when that's happening and what that means for sport on the ground?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's something that we are getting a lot of right now. Phase 3 is coming for our province. Saying that doesn't mean that we all of a sudden jump into phase 3 for the sports sector. And so we right now, actually, Shauna, can you pull up the sport activity chart? That'd be great. Right now we are in what we're calling transition measures. So that's the second column. Approximately May 19th. That's when May 19th is when we went to phase 2, and so we have broad, what we're looking for. So in terms of competition, it should be in club play only, modified games only, but they can be slowly introduced. For example, with phase 3, we don't go to progressively loosen. We'll be slowly transitioning there over the coming weeks, months. But it's not a switch. It is slowly being introduced. So really wanting to be clear that as phase 3, it doesn't just turn on to another phase for sport, because we have a lot more to be worked out and a lot more questions to be answered, and we're working with Public Health Office to answer some of those questions right now to make sure we're doing this safely and correctly.
Thanks, Jared. And when I get a second here, I'll put a link to that return to activity chart in the chat as well. Maybe I'll turn it over to Carolyn and Linda. So same question around timing. Any update you can provide in terms of sort of when your program or facilities are opening? Maybe let's start with you, Linda.
Sure. Well, we did open our main facility, the Tournament Capital Center, on June 1st, but at this time it is more of just drop-in activity. We are looking at booking courts in the near future, and then welcoming back our the university athletes and some of our other major user groups. But as of Monday, the 29th of June, many things are opening for us. So we are opening up some fields and ball diamonds. So they're not all opening, and part of that is just resources. So due to COVID, we did have to lay off a number of staff. And in our facility side, they have not been able to recall all of them. So, but we certainly are opening what we feel is an adequate number for now. And as if the demand shows that we need more, then we will definitely be opening more. We are also opening 1 to 2 sheets of ice in our twin arena at MacArthur Island. We will leave 2 for dry floor in the event that we do get some dry floor requests. And also we are opening up 1 outdoor pool. We are not opening our indoor pools. One is under a major reno, and the other one in Westside we are leaving probably for the summer. We'll open up our outdoor pool, and I guess 2 of our swim clubs and our synchro and so on will have access to that. They will likely get first access beyond what we do even for public programming. And I think that's pretty much all for us as far as opening. We are getting tons of requests already, as you can imagine. So we are, as Jared has already said, what's required provincially, we are asking. All user groups need to submit a safety plan. We are not reviewing, approving, or disproving the plan, but we are holding it. It will be filed for, if we ever need to view it. in the province bylaws have been tasked with sort of watching social distancing and looking at any kind of complaints that come to the municipality. So that's when we would be looking at the plans in greater detail, as if we did get any concerns or complaints coming our way. But again, the plans have been fantastic. All the groups that we're working with are working really hard to get their plans in, and we have bookings in and people are ready to start on Monday.
Oh, that's so great. It's that hope at the end of a very long tunnel. So yeah, I think we've seen the same thing. People are really, sharing the desire to get sport back safely. So thank you so much for providing that detail. Carolyn, did you want to talk about your programming?
Yeah, I think it sort of parallels with the return to sport, some of the work that my staff's been involved with the Explore Sport camps, the summer camps. So as everybody, local sport organizations can appreciate, is everybody's kind of planning, and you've got like 10 reiterations, and it's really, where's pickup, where's drop off, all the minute details that are really needed. So and constantly that document is being updated. So we have submitted for our Ignite summer camps, as well as our Explore Sport summer camps and our Ignite athlete development program to the city for those two in particular. And our board of directors has given approval for our guidelines and all of the measures that we've taken for protocols. City, like Linda said, doesn't approve, but they review, and we've just, as of today, we've got our areas that throughout the city confirmed to book. So that's huge for us for the summer.
Yeah, that's a massive milestone. Congratulations. I'm sure folks are happy to hear that.
Sorry, Shauna.
Please. No,
one more thing that I think is important for sport to keep in mind too, as well, as one of the things that we did, even though Bonnie Henry says, no more than 50 people and all that kind of stuff, like our summer camp program was 30 per week. And we've made a conscious decision to minimize that to 16 or 20, depending on the week. Our staff ratios were 10-1, and we've changed that to 4 children to 1, so a 4-to-1 ratio. So those are the things that we're doing as trying to have a high standard and continually ride the wave through this pandemic.
Mm-hmm. We've said we've never done this before. We hope to never do it again, but I think it speaks to that sort of slow progression of sport instead of kind of opening the floodgates. And we used to do 30, so let's do 30 again. So I think that's really wise. So I do see that a couple more participants have joined. So just a reminder, please put your questions. Hooray, we got one. Thank you, Cheryl. Into the question and answer box. They're really pivotal to help guide conversation. So like I said earlier, no question too detailed or too small. We want to hear them all. So just popping those in the Q&A chat box. Now they're coming in. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's move on to approvals, Jared. I think every time we do a webinar, folks want to know, can we be really clear about, if I'm a local club, who needs to approve my plan? Maybe let's start there in terms of that kind of oversight.
If you're a local club, your board of directors need to approve your plan. So you don't need approval from PacificSport or the public health office or anything like that. The only thing I do want to say is every provincial sport organization and how they're working with the sport is different. So there's some sports that might want to see a plan, like a local plan to the provincial sport organization. So I don't want to speak for some of those processes, but for the most part, local sport organization needs to get board approval from their board to then return to sport. Then the other layer, as Linda alluded to, is around the facility, the municipality operator, whatever, the municipality or the facility operator or whoever that may be, that you might need to submit a plan. For the most part, that is happening. They're not approving it for the most part as well, but it's another check and balance for it.
Appreciate that, Jared. And maybe I'll just, Linda, there's a question here around the city facility guidelines and protocols. Are those, I'll just read it. Where can we find the city facility guidelines and protocols of how they're managing their venues around groups and their sanitization requirements?
Well, for us, we have what's called a Let's Talk Kamloops website, and we have been posting everything COVID related on that website. That would include our facility plans. Because the Tournament Capital Center is the only one technically wide open right now, that's the only plan up. But what we also plan to do is we are going to email every user group that requests space our plan, so that they can see what our safety plan is. And an example being in our arena, when we first open, we're not opening dressing rooms. And there's going to be, there are 2 washrooms that the athletes and coaches can use with skates on because they're accessible on the rubberized floor. How they get into the building is going to look different because for security and safety, the doors will be locked and they'll be greeted by our facility staff. So there's some things that are going to look different to the users. And so we want to give them our plan ahead of time, and then they know what to expect and how to plan their groups. They will have their plan, and it doesn't necessarily have to align with ours, but it's more as a heads up what to expect when you arrive at our facility. And that will be the same. We don't have safety plans for fields per se, but we will have them for our arenas, for any of our recreation centers, any of our community centers where people may be using some of that space, and our pools, of course.
Well, that's great. And I think, you know, what we keep hearing is the need for alignment and open sharing. So I think that's an awesome plan in terms of making clear what the expectations are, what people are going to face when they come into the arena or into the facility. So that makes a lot of sense. Okay, Jared, back to you. I'm sorry, but I think a lot of them are going to be coming your way. But so we got a question around the approval by health authority. So can you just clarify, I've heard that some sport groups are getting approved by health authorities. Is that okay, or what's their role in the return to sport?
Yeah, everyone's trying to figure out new processes right now. And so there has been some dialogue between sport groups and health authorities, and they're a great resource to understand public health requirements and how to embed them in. But for actual sport activity on the ice or on the field, the actual sport specific, the health authorities aren't approving modifications in sport or what competition should look like. That is coming from the guidelines from Via Sport and the sport specific guidelines, and those are what should be used for your plans, and it shouldn't be coming from the health authority. Health authority can help with a lot of different, the space, the cleaning, things like that. But the actual sport activity shouldn't be coming from a health authority and approval.
Perfect, thank you. And then we're getting a couple questions here around competition. So are we allowed to host competition? Will there be a return to competition such as a cross-country ski race or LOPET this winter? And if there were a competition, would the competition need a plan of its own, unique from a sport plan?
So I'm gonna answer the competition one first, and I'm gonna take it broadly, and I'll come into the actual cross-country ski example. Right now, the phase that we are in is we shouldn't really be hosting competitions. There are some cases where it does work because of you are inherently, the sport is physical distance. So example, tennis. If you are a club that you have inter-club play, you're not traveling, it's not a provincial competition, you aren't traveling around to different municipalities or communities. It's within a club and you're playing, that is okay. But if you are playing rugby, no, that you shouldn't be competing at this time. So every sport is going to have a different transition or back to competition, and you'll need to be following those guidelines kind of more broadly into building out your specific case. For winter, I've said this a lot. COVID seems every day is like a dog year. I don't know what this winter is going to look like, and no one knows. So we're trying, and it's really tough because if you're trying to host competitions, you need a lot of time to plan. But we just don't have that right now. We don't have that information, and we won't for a while of what it looks like and what phase we're in terms of actually being able to host those competitions come winter.
And then just the follow-up to that, is it important or required that there's a return to competition plan if they were going to host a competition?
Right. No is generally, but there might be different cases where you're being asked to have a separate plan for a competition. That has, if it, it could be a municipality that you're trying to host an event, and this could be 6 months down the line, and so you might have to have a specific plan for that event. But in general, right now, there's no requirement to have a competition plan that would be different than your COVID-19 safety plan. They should be following the same protocols right now. That might change though as we loosen.
Right, but bottom line, right, there shouldn't be a competition happening at present.
No.
Bummer, yeah. I know we all wish it could be sport as per usual, especially as we're running into summer months, and my, softball league, I will miss it greatly, but yeah, I get that it's safety first. Okay, so in terms of oversight, this question comes up quite a bit, which is, so who's responsible for making sure that clubs or organizations are sticking to their plans? So maybe I'll send it to Jared first in terms of will there be monitoring? What can people do if they need to report an issue? And then Linda, maybe I'll ask you to speak about what you're doing in Kamloops around the oversight.
Yeah, in general, as I said, every organization needs to have a COVID-19 safety plan. That is legislation, and WorkSafe BC has done a lot of work to build out some of those templates that we've adopted. They do have people in field to check to ensure that they're being followed. But the oversight really comes from your board of directors and your organizations, and every municipality also or facility operator also operates a little bit differently in how they are working with those clubs to ensure the plans are being followed. But it really is on you and at the end of the day to ensure that you are keeping your club safe. The only thing I'll add to that is that the ministerial order to ensure that sport not-for-profits in our province are covered, the liability are covered through COVID, and for COVID, you need to be following via sports return to sport guidelines and sport specific guidelines to have that coverage. So it is another check to ensure that we're keeping our community safe.
Great. And Linda, do you want to speak a little bit about sort of your plans at Kamloops in terms of making sure sport organizations are adhering to their sport-specific plans or that oversight piece in general?
Sure. I want to echo first Jared's comments because I think it's really important. What we are trying to do is to get the local sport organizations to take ownership over their plans and to have that COVID champion, if you will, whether it's a captain, a coach, or even a non-player, somebody who is, going to be at the field, at the rink, a parent, if we're talking adult sports, what are they, do they have a champion so that they have somebody who is actually watching? Because I think that it is easy to get caught up in practice, training, or whatever it is, and to forget about the social distancing or the hand hygiene or the number 50, because we're looking at 50 as per diamond, per field, per sheet of ice. So, if you take some groups, depending on the size, we are also encouraging only one parent per child, if we're talking minor sports, come to the field and not tag along 4 or 5 young children with them, because obviously that number, the number of people at that venue increases greatly with that. But at the end of the day, our bylaws are ultimately responsible for ensuring physical distancing and all matters related to COVID for any business in our community. So whether that's retail, restaurant, whether it's sport, ultimately at the end of the day, if we receive a complaint or a concern, our bylaws team has to check it out. Now, we're pretty fortunate here. Through COVID, we've had a team called Park Ambassadors. And this is a team of employees that our program team, who normally would be programming services and programs, and we haven't run them. So they've been out in the parks and just engaging with the public around social distancing and not gathering in large groups. And we will use that team for some of our return to sport. So in some of the venues where we know it's going to be a really busy day or a really busy afternoon, all the diamonds are booked at that particular venue, we'll likely send them out and, you know, just let them have a little peek and chat with the users and make sure everybody is, you know, playing safe and being safe. And then if there's challenges from the ambassadors, then they would report those to bylaws if it's something that they couldn't address on our own. To this date, all of the engagement they've had, you know, at tennis courts, at pickleball courts, because they've already been open, they've had really, for the most part, positive engagement. Again, just reminding people of the importance of social distancing and you know, it's mandated, if you will. It's part of what's coming from Via Sport, who was asked by the province to put together a plan. So at the end of the day, it's bylaws, but you know, we're hoping that for the most part that the local sports will kind of police this themselves.
Yeah, and as we talked about, I think everyone has the intention of, you know, we don't want to go backwards. So I think that shared idea that err on the side of safety, and I quite like that Park Ambassadors program. I think it's something we could probably share with the other regions across the province on our other town halls as well. So we're getting some questions rolling in. I encourage you to keep asking them. We will get to all of them, I'm sure, today. So Jared, you spoke a little bit about insurance. And I know hot off the presses last night, there was an update to the ministerial order around kind of that emergency act. So can you just fill people in case they haven't seen that? And I'll link the press release in the chat box as well.
Yeah, so when it was released, the ministerial order was released, there were some questions about the Emergency Act because the coverage was only during the Emergency Act, and that only can be extended for 14 days. So, you know, you're getting your sport up and moving, but you don't know if the Emergency Act is then going to be not going forward, and you don't know if your sport or your participants are covered, or your board of directors and officers. So there was some concern about that. We did receive this last night that there is, you know, legislation coming in, related measuring acts, so that we will ensure that sport is covered, even if the Emergency Act is complete. So one of the lines, British Columbians can be confident that these emergency orders will not end abruptly the moment that declaration of state of emergency ends. They will have adequate notice to prepare. So we are finding, this just came in last night, we're finding out more details of what this looks like for the ministerial order that came through for the sports sector. But you can see that the province is trying to do everything in their power to keep everyone safe and the sports system moving along.
Yeah, appreciate that. So I think I'd like to raise Doug's question now, which we'll go a little bit broader and hopefully we can provide a little bit of clarity. But other than the announced federal programs, have there been any discussions around other funding sources to help with increased costs and decreased revenue? I think we know that our sport organizations are facing significant financial hardship, especially without having those registration fees coming in. So I could provide a bit of context, but Jared, anything you want to speak to here?
Yeah, just that, you know, every sector is hurting right now, and the government has their ears open to the concerns. Via Sport has been advocating for those concerns. I've been listening to, you know, I lean on people like Carolyn to tell me about the concerns in community, so we can voice that to the province, saying that there's nothing guaranteed right now. But that doesn't mean we aren't trying to ensure that those concerns are heard and we keep the sports sector moving forward long term, because it is an issue. But what that looks like, any details, there's nothing, and there's nothing that we can promise.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I know that I've been part of some of the conversations with our ministry, and they're very aware and are working hard to see what they can do. So again, we can't say anything guaranteed, but have some hope there. And I think just kind of with my other research hat on, I know that there's some other, like some of the foundations. So I know Vancouver Foundation, McConnell Foundation, some of the nonprofit foundations have been doing some emergency relief funding. And I know that some sport organizations, especially that have great community impact or work with populations who face additional barriers, are eligible. So we have been making efforts to update those on our websites. And I think, Doug, this is an important reminder. We need to continue to dig and see where there's different funding sources, so we can work on your behalf. Okay, I want to move to Cheryl's question now, and I love that sport people are passionate and they are creative, so this is a sign. So her question is, can we create a virtual competition through people entering their workout or practice times into a scoring system, as long as groups are under 50 and social distancing is practiced?
Yes, let's get creative and find ways to ensure that we're following the public health orders. And if we're doing that, that's great. We shouldn't be traveling right now. We shouldn't be in competition where we can't physically distance. But if there's other ways that we can do it, let's do it and go for it.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing this a lot. Talking about kind of this need to reimagine sport right now and take it as an opportunity to do that skill building and focus more on practice and on competition. So I love the different ideas that are coming through. Let's talk about the maximum 50 people, because I think this, while it seems straightforward, is not in practice. So maybe Jared, can you speak to what counts as a maximum of 50 people? Is that per diamond, per facility? How does that actually play out on
Yeah, and Linda alluded to it as well. It is a tricky one, and when we see 50, it's like, okay, that makes sense, and then you get into the nuances of different scenarios, and all of a sudden it really doesn't. It's really muddy. 50 people, is the max as a gathering of what we're allowed to do. So 50 people in one area, there shouldn't be more. Saying that, if you're at in a sport context, or if you are in a ball diamond complex where there's 4 different diamonds, and there's ways of moving people around that space that you can physically distance, you can have 50 people at each diamond. It's then about a way finding around those different places to ensure that those 50 people in one diamond can all of a sudden meet with the 50 people in another diamond. It would be the same as a recreation center. There's a pool, there's a gym, there's an arena. They can have 50 people at different parts of it. It's just a matter of way finding and ensuring that people keep their physical distance. The other one is, if there's a large area and you can split that area, but there's still, again, able to physically distance, that can be in place. I would suggest, and I've seen this from most municipalities, facility operators and sport groups, starting small, managing that, seeing how it goes, and then adding in people as you go. Starting big is a lot harder to manage and dial back. So a lot of our sports are doing it that way with quite good success at this point.
Yeah, Linda, I know you spoke about the 50-person, but did you want to add anything? It's okay if not, but if you wanted to add anything there, give you space to jump in.
Yeah, I think it's, as I've said earlier, and as Jared said, and I think the other thing that we're looking at is putting in a 30-minute buffer. So with all of the bookings, either the groups, so if we have one group who typically books 8 hours at one facility, then they either have to put in a 30-minute buffer between each group coming and going. That allows for the group who's finishing to vacate the facility before the new group would be arriving. And if the groups feel that that's not something that they can do, or they don't want to pay for that 30-minute buffer, then we will schedule for them. So we'll say, okay, you can have these diamonds for your 90 minutes. If that's what it's going to be, then we're going to do a 30-minute buffer before the next booking takes place. And that will be the same in arenas. It's a little bit easier because we'll do a clean in between, but instead of a 10-15 minute, we're going to expand that to 30 minutes between each group. And I think that will help with mitigating those large groups of people in one spot. And then we'll manage the washroom facilities at each of those places, particularly, let's say, fields and diamonds, with appropriate signage and appropriate occupancy limits and so on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think, yeah, never before have we had to consider the folks who are coming and going as well, not just who's participating. So that 30-minute buffer makes a lot of sense to me. I want to pick up on a question that Cheryl's asking, but start a little bit broader in terms of high performance. Carolyn, are you okay to speak a little bit about what you're doing around kind of high performance programming? And then I can turn it over to Jared to speak about sort of high performance competition.
So more specifically, just on the Athlete Ignite program, which has got 3 components: sprint training, lifting, strength and conditioning aspect, and then the foundational movements as gymnastics. And those are the 3 pillars of that athlete development program. So protocols have been set up for each one in which venue we are using specifically for those 3 disciplines. And so, again, with the protocols that we are looking for hygiene, sanitation, where the athletes enter. And I think it's really critical for everyone, of course, is the communication plan to your customer, if you will. So whether that's the parent, the youth, everybody, and just really making sure that we all know what it's like when we go into a grocery store for the first time that we haven't been to. And it's like, okay, what am I to do now? It's the same sort of thing that for our parents and our athletes and things like that too as well. So, specific to high performance, for sure, really thinking about that stream, the actual venue that you're using. Obviously, you'd be having to align with the municipality because you'd need the permit. So it really depends on where that is. Certainly, the national sport organizations have their high performance plan. They're online. We've shared them out. That's filtered down to the provincial organizations too as well. So, locally there is resources, to look at some of those more specific, pieces to high performance.
Yeah, appreciate that. I think it speaks to that whole need for alignment. And Jared, I know you touched on travel a little bit, but Cheryl has a question. We have heard Europe intends to proceed with events this winter. How can we hold competition to qualify our athletes for those competitions that will be happening in other jurisdictions? Tough one.
Yeah, this is a really tough question. We're just not there yet. We're not supposed to be doing any type of travel right now, and as we loosen, there might be some travel. As has been alluded to, phase 3 is probably starting right away. The difference between travel for a competition and a sports setting is a lot different for me to go visit my grandma, and so there's a lot of factors that need to be considered. At this time, those types of competitions aren't going to be held. We are working to figure out what those next steps are, but that is 5 steps away. We have a few to get done and completed, and make sure that we don't have outbreaks, and then we can get there. So we're not there yet.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I know it's been interesting to look at we've had a lot of international downloads of our BC return to sport guidelines. So I know, some parts of Europe may be further ahead. We're leading in some other areas and other jurisdictions. So I think globally, everyone's trying to grapple with this, and the uncertainty is unprecedented. So appreciate the question, Cheryl. Let's talk about contact sport. So, Jared, can you provide a bit more detail around what is the definition of contact sport? It's listed in the guidelines, and then do you anticipate that being allowed in phase 3, or what that looks like in phase 3?
Yeah, contact sport right now is any coming into that 2-meter bubble. So that's what we are defining as contact sport right now. And contact really shouldn't be part of any type of activity in our current phase and where we are right now. There are, if there's someone running by and it's within 2 meters, that some of those things are going to happen and is okay, but for the most part, we should be physically distanced, and that's rule 1 right now. And so that's how we're defining contact. Saying that, we are working with Public Health Office to understand what contact will look like as we transition more so in other phases. And we're trying to, I'm not a health expert. I'm just trying to get the health advice and then sportify it. That's what I am trying to do. And so I need, myself and my colleague, Heather Beatty are working to try to get some of those answers, so that we can build that into a sport context, and then sportify it even more within the sport specific. So that's where we're at with contact right now.
And just to follow up to that, what about if there's like protective equipment? So earlier we got asked a question around, the hockey helmets with the full plastic or glass, and they're in gear. Does that rule still apply to them?
Yes, it does. Right now, we're limiting contact, and that might change in other iterations of the phases as we move forward. But for right now, no, that still counts as contact.
Okay, great. Appreciate that. We've got a question here around sort of around that oversight. But do you have any advice for communication to members who comment that they see a private sport organization practicing and not having to follow the same protocols or processes as a not-for-profit sport organization?
Yeah, this is a really interesting and a complicated issue, and something that I probably field more questions about this than anything, and I wish I had a better answer for you. If you're in the amateur sports system, you are a not-for-profit sport organization. We are part of the public system. Part of being part of that is that we are adhering to guidelines from your provincial sport organization, and that's really linked to our government. In saying that, that's what we think is our safest way back to sport, and the safest way back for our communities to get through this pandemic. The private organizations that are falling outside of that, they have to make decisions for the business, but saying that they still need to, no matter what, follow the public health orders set by our province. When they're pushing some of those boundaries, it is up to the public to really, as customers, to see the differences in what they're doing compared to the public or the not-for-profit system, and they have to make their decisions. And yeah, I'll leave it there, but it is complicated. I would, as in terms of the specific, in terms of communication, being able to show that you are keeping your community safe by following the people that from the public health, from your sport organizations, have done a lot of work to make sure that your community, your participants are safe, and that you think is the best way forward. And you can't say that about other organizations.
Go ahead, Linda.
I don't know if it helps to maybe make some of them feel at ease, but from the city's perspective, we don't care if you're private, nonprofit, minor, adult, senior, you're submitting a plan. So if there's somebody who isn't affiliated with a PSO, we're recommending they still look at that PSO's plan. If your sport is baseball, but you're a private group and you're not affiliated with Baseball BC, we're still recommending that you look at their plan as a guide. You use Via Sports template that they've so kindly provided and come up with your own plan. So no group will be booking space with us unless we have a plan from them. So I hope that sort of eases some of our nonprofit groups who think that maybe some of the privates might have a one-up because they're not held to the same standards. We are holding everybody to the same standards in our municipality.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that is really helpful to add on. And Jared, do you want to just clarify, from Via Sports perspective, are there any different requirements for unaffiliated sport organizations, so those who don't have a PSO or an NSO. So, we've gotten questions about Quidditch in the past. What are those groups required to do in order to start returning to play?
Yeah, and it's actually what Linda just said. We've worked with BCRPA to develop an unaffiliated template, COVID-19 safety template, because we know that there's a lot of sport that falls outside of the public system that that's connected to provincial sport organization. They need to follow the public health orders as well. The relationship between municipalities and the sports system has been, I've been so impressed with the connection, and we are in it together to make sure that everyone's supported. And so those groups need to submit a plan for the most part, from what I've seen from municipalities, and it is really important that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So we do have time for a couple more questions. So if you've been holding on to your question, I would encourage you to drop it in the chat, because we have a couple of minutes left. I think the last question that came up in a town hall this morning that I know we've had previous questions about is equipment. So Jared, can you maybe speak about how folks should be managing the sharing of equipment? So this morning the question was, we've got a tennis camp. Does each kid have their ball? Do we have to sanitize the balls in between? Do they need to wash their hands every time that there's transmission? Or not transmission, but they're touching the same equipment. Can you speak a little bit about kind of that equipment requirement?
Yeah, for right now, we should be minimizing the touch points between equipment. So in part of the modifications, that we should be increasing cleaning protocols and decreasing touch points. If in that tennis example, if every kid has their own ball for a part of the practice, you mark it with something that marks that that's their ball, that's one measure. If they're playing between a few different participants and that game or that activity is over, that's where we could clean the surface of the ball and to move on to the next one. So what we're trying to do is decrease the amount of touch points to a minimum right now with equipment.
Awesome. And Karen snuck in there. Thanks for your question, Karen. Whose responsibility is it to provide hand sanitizers, cleaning equipment in the pool environment, for example? Is it the sporting group or is it the municipality? Who wants to take this one?
That's a good question, and it's something that you're going to have to work with your municipality and facility operator on. Everyone's a little bit different in what they're providing, and it really is a marrying of the two plans. As a municipality, they may be setting these protocols and then have clean supplies in place, but they also might say in those protocols, this is what we'll supply, but you'll also need to supply this, and this, because you might have extra equipment or extra something or other that you'll need to bring in. So it should be top of mind and something that then is talked about. And Linda, I'll throw it over to you if you want to add anything in terms of what specific for what you're doing.
I think that you hit it with being, we need to work on it together. There'll be some things that are clearly the responsibility of the municipality. If it's our equipment, we're cleaning it. In all of our facilities, we are required to have a hand sanitizer station at the entrance or near there, so we do that. But that the user groups will be, if they're following protocol, they'll also supply their own hand sanitizer. So for instance, in fields, we don't have a hand sanitizer station, but most of the plans I've seen, they are bringing their own. So with the pool, I think it's really gonna, if it's your equipment, you'll be responsible for cleaning it and bringing your own cleaning supplies and doing all of that. If it's our equipment, we'll do that. And obviously we have protocols in place to clean the facility. However often there's that plan is already in place. I don't know it off the top of my head, but we are required to clean the facilities. Again, with our pool, we are not opening the change room at this time. So, and again, that is just to reduce the touch points and less cleaning.
Yeah, Carolyn. Please jump
And
in.
if I can just add to that, so really looking at your, like from a program standpoint too as well, so kids coming to summer camp or athletes going to the, athlete Ignite program, really just sort of saying, okay, here's your backpack. Well, your water's going to be full. You're going to have your own hand sanitizer. Those are the type of, if we're outside, it's sunscreen. It's just all those little things that we would normally tell them what they need to bring anyways. And then of course, when you're inside a facility, like such as Tournament Capital Center, you see the disinfectant right there. And so it's that, to Linda's point, that sort of shared piece in terms of facility piece versus, our own personal things, whether we're at a field or whatever. So we want some measures that they've got some personal items as well.
I don't think we can ever have too much hand sanitizer at this point. So yeah, bring it and supply it. I think it's both ways. So let's get Doug's question, last question in, and before we do a closing word. Is the VS Sport safety plan the same as the work safe plan, or are both required, Jared?
Great question, Doug. We have been working, I've been working with WorkSafe BC directly while they were building out some of their protocols for recreation and sport. And so they've developed their safety plan template. What we did is take that template and build in more sport language in it for you to use. So they are one and the same. If you feel like the WorkSafe BC one is what one you want to use, that's great. We've just tried to shift that document into more of a sport context for you to use. So you don't need both, you need one, and you can use whatever plan that you'd like.
Perfect, thanks, Jared. Okay, let's I'll just say I appreciate everyone choosing to spend the hour with us. I know if your life is like ours at VS Sport right now, you are incredibly busy and lots of people are knocking on your door. And so where you spend your time is very important. We appreciate that you spent it with us. I'll just briefly say that when the webinar closes, you will get a link to a survey. It takes 2 minutes and it's critically important for us, not only your feedback, but if there are any burning questions you didn't ask today or that weren't answered, it really helps us guide our next steps. So maybe Carolyn, I'll start with you. Just any closing words, and we'll go around before we close off.
I really appreciate everybody coming together. It's been a lot of our fielding our calls have been, people have just been open. They don't want to do the wrong thing. So I think that's really been a positive move. I think the word of the day I often say to my staff is adaptability, because things are what they seem today might be different tomorrow. And we can't, we kind of have to be open to that and those changes, so really thank you for allowing me on the call.
No, thanks for being here. I love adaptability. Linda, did you want to say a closing word?
Sure, and thank you to VS Sport and Carolyn for asking me to be a part of the call. Really appreciate that. I want to say I'm really encouraged by the plans that we have received to date, the ones that I've reviewed. All the groups are working really hard to put together a meaningful, thoughtful plan that they feel will keep their participants safe and our community safe. So I'm truly appreciative of that. And I just want to say to the groups, the sport groups that are on the call, really work with your municipality, reach out to your community, whomever that is in your community, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask those hard questions, because you really do have to work together to make this work. And if we do have any of the smaller municipalities on the call, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to help, and everything has to be adjusted for the size of your community, for the resources that are available. There isn't one community that's going to look like the other, and we all have to be open to that. So just because your neighboring community is allowing this doesn't mean that we can allow that. So, I think Carolyn noted earlier, we just have to work together. And I think that's how we will, sport will return sooner if we work together.
Love it. It's that adaptability and alignment. I think I need 2 Post-it notes. Okay, I'll leave the last word to you, Jared.
I just want to say that the last couple of months have been crazy, and no one knows what the next couple months will look like. But I am very appreciative of everyone reaching out and supporting us as a collective of moving forward. Whether you are a sport group, president, volunteer, a coach, or a parent, your municipality. We really do need to do this together and as a collective. I also want to say that I understand that the information is changing drastically, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. So my hope and everything that I'm trying to do is get the right information into the right hands, and we're going to be working a lot closer with PacificSport, Interior BC, and the VS Sport Regional Alliance as a collective, so that we can get the information out as quick as possible as it changes. And the municipalities have been absolutely crucial in this work, and so continue to forge those connections between sport and municipalities, facility operators, because that is the way we'll safely return.
I love it. So thanks again, everyone, for joining. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and keep in touch.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.